everyone, my name is Simona Kotin and I'm a web developer here at Microsoft. And in this video, we're going to learn how to connect to a MongoDB database from our serverless API. And in order to do that, we first need to have a MongoDB database. And you can see here in my VS Code instance, in going into the Azure extensions, I have in my list of databases a beginner products MongoDB database, which is called serverless, that includes a product collection with a list of 2 documents. This is an Azure Cosmos DB database that uses a MongoDB model. And to connect to our database, the first thing that we need to do in our serverless function is run npm install MongoDB. And this will update our package.json file to include our dependency on the MongoDB Node.js driver. And then going into the index.js file, first thing that we want to do is actually import the MongoDB driver. So I'm going to type here const mongo client equals require MongoDB. And we no longer need to read our data from the static file that we used earlier. So I'm going to delete this import here of the product data file. And then I will replace the products object here to return an empty array for now. All right, so now we need to connect to our database. And to do that, we're going to define a connect function that's an asynchronous function. And here we want to initialize a client object that uses Mongo client to connect to our database. And we need to pass in a connection string. And to get that connection string, I'll go back into my Azure extension, the databases extension. And right here on the beginner products database, I can right click and you can see that I have the option of copying the connection string directly here from VS Code. So I'll click copy connection string. And we have 2 options. I can either paste in the connection string directly here in my code, but I would highly advise against that because our code will be committed to GitHub and we don't want to expose our keys right here in our code. So I'll go back into the file explorer and we can see here that we have a local.settings.json file. And this is a file where we can safely store our environment variables. So I'll add a new value here that's called db connection. And this is where I will paste in the connection string I've copied earlier. And in order to use it in our code, I'm going to have to use process.env.db_connection. And once we connect to our database, we want to return our client object, which we're going to use in our main method here in our function. So first, I want to initialize the client object and await for our connection to happen, to execute. And then I want to initialize or create a new object called database. And here I will use our client to select the serverless database. And just to test out that this is working correctly, I will console log connected to our database. And let me just go run this directly in VS Code. In the debug panel here, I will click the play button. And what this will do is it will kick off the Azure Functions runtime directly in my local machine, which will then allow me to run my application locally and debug my serverless functions very easily using VS Code. So let's go and first inspect what does our serverless API endpoint return now. You can see here it's an empty array, which makes sense because that's what we defined our list of products to be. We can also see the console log message connected to our database. So this is great. Next thing that we want to do here is use our database object here and select the product collection. And here we want to retrieve all products, so we won't have any filter function, and we want that to be an array. So once we restart our server, we'll be able to see the updated list of products. So going back into the browser, I'm now refreshing the web page. And we can see that our list is still the same, and that's because we want to actually await on the query results to be returned. So going back in our browser and refreshing the page here, and now we can see the 2 products that we have created or we have in our database. And let me just go back into the database itself and into the sliced bread document, and I've changed my mind. This is not the best loaf of fresh sliced wheat bread, so I'm gonna change that description and upload that data to Cosmos DB, and by refreshing the web page, we can now see that the data is being retrieved dynamically.